Good evening. My name is the Reverend Dr. Rodney Sadler, and I'm here to welcome you to this month's edition of the Dangerous Dialogues. Dangerous Dialogues are a series of conversation about crucial issues that the faith community needs to have, but it's often reluctant to have. This month's topic is Nonviolence in Action, How Palestinian Self-Development is Transforming the Conflict with Israel. 72 years later, a conflict neither party ultimately understood when it began continues to rage. In a land that bears two names, Palestine, Israel, tensions persist predicated on the misinterpretation of ancient holy texts because of a narrative crafted to inflame, lines of division that have been drawn hard and fast, fictive boundary lines literally drawn in the sand to separate brothers born from a common father, called by the same name in different intonations, Ibrahim, Abraham. These divisions have crystallized. The conflict rages despite peace plans, assassinations, assaults, occupation, resistance, terrorism, frustrations, fears, and foreign wars. In fact, wars have been fought with this conflict as their basis. Actual wars in the region, actual wars regions away, ideological wars around the world. People have been branded anti-Semites, terrorists, occupationists, oppressors based on their allegiances. Conflicts have reached the streets of our nation. This crisis is the gift that continues to give, though no one wants to receive it. Worse, humanity has been obscured in the midst of this struggle. Israelis and Jews have been perceived as citizens of a bellicose nation, self-described by some of its own activists as a people too focused on militarism and mechanized might. Some say that it has saturated their media, their society, their social structures in a way that has compromised their very humanity. Palestinians and Muslims have been presented to the world as a bellicose people, imperiling civilian populations with a never-ending ideological and actual war. Never satisfied, never contented with their portion of a land that was once, never was theirs. As such, many, particularly those motivated by Christian Zionism in our nation, have written the Palestinians off as less than valuable, less than worthy, less than human, and entitled to an equality of rights. How is peace in this part of the world possible? How can those defined by conflict, born in war, nurtured at the bosom of militarism, how can they ever have peace? Many view peace as improbable and unlikely end to this conflict. Untenable, unattainable, too foolhardy to consider, too foolish to work for. Yet there are others. Others who have imagined that the conflict can have an end. Others who believe that everyone's humanity can be resurfaced by an appeal to the principles of nonviolence. Others who believe that the fruit of peace grows from planting the seeds of celebration of our common humanity. Others who find hope in dialogue and in fostering relationships and in self-development and in sharing stories. We are here tonight to hear from two others in the midst of a conflict that has normalized enmity. These others use words like communication, autonomy, development, uplift, humanity, equality, and love. And in them, they find the hope for a new way forward. These others, undaunted by the failures of the past, offer the prospects of a new day when those who recognize that those on the other side have equal human worth. Tonight, I want you to hear from these two others with views outside of the norm who are willing to courageously stand together and non-violently fight for a better tomorrow for all of the people of the region. May these two others continue their work until nonviolence and the universal equality of all humanity is mainstream, party line, normative view, status quo in this region and around the world. Let me introduce to you our two main speakers tonight. Imprisonment, loss, and pain forged peace activist and Taghyeer founder Ali Abu Awwad's calling to address Palestinian suffering, his people's quest for equal rights and freedom, and his heart's understanding of Israelis' fear. Years of peace-building efforts led him to believe that the key to transformation of the conflict was in Palestinian hands all along. Through building cooperative action among Palestinians to bring social change and community development, while nonviolently resisting the occupation and the denial of their basic human rights. Our other speaker this evening is familiar to some of you, Roberta Wall. She's a member and active participant in Congregation Beth Israel in Asheville and Romemu in New York City. She received her JD from New York University School of Law and is currently a retired civil rights attorney. For more than a decade, Wall has facilitated nonviolence communication training in Israel and in Palestine, bringing together hundreds of Israelis and Palestinians and internationals. She will speak about her experiences and understanding of nonviolent communication training within Palestinian society, between Israelis and Palestinians, and between Jews and Christians and Muslims. We will start with a presentation from Ali, then after he speaks, we will hear from Roberta. After both of their presentations, I will engage them both with a few questions before taking questions from the larger audience. The questions will be distilled by Aaron Mills, who will make sure that we are appropriate in our discourse. We're not here tonight to cause conflict. We are here tonight to learn about new ways forward to recognize our full humanity. I'm excited to turn this conversation over now to Ali Abu Awwad. Ali?
Thank you very much, and good evening. In my time, it's good morning. It's 2 a.m. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. Yeah, I'm not seeking for another conflict, Dr. Rodney, for sure, because otherwise I should not be here talking to you. I have so many people here to argue and conflict with. Again, my name is Ali Abu Awwad. I'm a Palestinian nonviolence activist, and I'm the founder of Taghyeer, Change. Taghyeer is the Palestinian national nonviolence movement that I founded with many community leaders in Palestine for two important purposes. Our vision as a movement is to create an environment where solutions and peaceful solutions are possible, and envisioning a place where every human being identity is practiced in a fashion of dignity and equal rights for all. On the other hand, we take responsibility as Palestinian toward our people, and our philosophy is to stop acting as victims and stop blaming everyone for the injustice, the daily suffering that we face, and take responsibility toward our people to create a healthy society that can be trusted and can be engaged with the international community, and it can neighbor all the countries around us, including Israel. I was born not with peace values. I was born as a refugee from 1948, was born and raised in the West Bank to a very political family from my mother's side. My mother was a political activist engaged in PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, and I have faced events of humiliation, especially when I saw my mother was beaten in the front of my eyes in the first time I was 10 years old. And in 1987, when the first Palestinian uprising started, it didn't take me a minute to join and participate, trying to deal with this kind of pain or revenge, if you want to call it, inside me. And then I start my participation in the first Intifada. Then I was arrested twice. I end in the prison to serve 4 years as a political prisoner with my mother. And my first engagement or encounter with nonviolence was when we both joined a hunger strike inside the prison because we wanted to see each other. And after 17 days of starving and struggling, we could meet. So for the first time in my life, I discovered that I was blinded as a fighter even to the best weapon that I have never used, which is my humanity. I start learning in the prison about nonviolence leaders, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Gandhi, and others. And my whole mind and even my political ideology has changed. I was totally transformed about the way to achieve my rights and about an effective way to take me to my freedom. Then I was released by Oslo Peace Initiative. I tried really to support the initiative on the ground because I was part of the Fatah leadership. And this process, the peace initiative has failed because of different reasons: lack of responsibility, the continuation of the Israeli occupation, kind of corruption within the leadership in Palestine, also engagement or intervening by the some parties in the international communities in our conflict, because I am quite sure that there are governments, countries, parties, or even politicians around us who don't want to see an end to this conflict because we are a good environment for political investment using our blood. So finally, the peace process has failed in 2000. The second Intifada started. I couldn't really take any part of it because it didn't speak about me. It was mostly militant, led by militant groups. Doesn't mean that I don't agree with the resistance, but I disagree totally with the way to resist the occupation, which was a militant way. I was politically convinced that armed struggle will not lead my people to freedom or to justice. On the other hand, I couldn't keep my engagement in the peace process because it didn't serve my desire to freedom on the ground to become a citizen. So I become so confused between the identity of the fighter who is not able to fight anymore and the identity of citizenship in a state that has not been established to guarantee and to secure the peace agreement and to create normal neighborhood with Israel. So I become desperate. So one day, to make a very long story short, one day I was wounded by an Israeli settler, and while I was having my medical treatment in Saudi Arabia, actually, I received the news that my older brother Yusuf was stopped in the entrance of my town, Beit Omar, near Hebron, and very violently killed. So again, what do you do? What do you do with all of what you faced in your life and what you're still going through? Revenge definitely is the first reaction. You don't want to see the other side. You don't want to, experience this taste of loss, humiliation, injustice again. And my brother was not engaged in any fighting. So one day, very surprising, my mother received a phone call from an Israeli bereaved father, and he started telling her that there is a group of bereaved Israeli families who have lost someone in the conflict, are willing to come and pay condolences, and they understand the injustice, and they wanna share with us their pain, but they wanna work with us for a better future, even though these are the ones who paid the highest price in the conflict. It really affected me deeply in my heart, and the meeting has happened in my home in 2002, actually, long time ago, and that meeting has changed my life. I discovered that I'm not just the only human being on this holy land, but my enemies suddenly, they have a human face, a human heart, and they have the right to exist normally, secure, without any pain. So my journey has started. I attended so many peace activities, and I led movements, and even went to do crazy steps on the ground by talking to settlers. I created an initiative called Roots, which is a local initiative in the West Bank between Israelis and settlers. Then I said, well, this is all good and nice, but how about my people? Because I totally believe that we Palestinians are the most, we have the most just case, but sometimes we're a very bad lawyer. And how about responsibility within our society? The key is in our hand to create a national, massive nonviolence movement that welcome every human being to be our partner and to engage us, because you know what the difference between peace activism in Israel and Palestine. In Israel, Israeli activists mostly are seeking for good Palestinians, nice voices to stand for peaceful solution and nonviolence. It's mostly about emotional healing of a kind of creating a trust toward the Palestinians, securing themselves, even overcoming the Jewish fear, which has become our biggest enemy. But on the other hand, this is very tiny and limited, because Palestinians also, after all of these years of activism, couldn't find a practical nonviolence framework that can change their life conditions and not just focus in changing their mind or their thoughts. So I founded Taghyeer as a Palestinian national movement 4 years ago with good partners, with good activists. Today we are spreading very fast on the ground, because we close the gap between political leadership that, in my opinion, has failed to achieve any rights for my people. On the other hand, between the grassroots who are not represented. And the fear of normalization. What I mean by that, Palestinians are afraid to adopt nonviolence, to be blamed that they are normalizing the relation with the occupation before the peace agreement. There is a big fear there. So Israel will keep going in all what Israel is doing on the expense of the Palestinian silence. Finally, I found myself really get engaged deeply with my society and with the world. We do so many different activities. We have around 17 projects that we are doing. And nonviolence for me, and the big lesson in my life, that nonviolence is not just my best weapon to achieve my freedom. Nonviolence is the celebration of my existence. Nonviolence has gave my life a meaning, to wake up in the morning and say, I'm not victim. And the one who killed my brother wanted to bury my humanity in the same grave. And my rights are not depends on the Israeli act on the ground. And add to that, I think we have a lot of homework to be done before we talk about joint actions. Each side has a tremendous responsibility to bring his own people to the table. Means that uh, we should develop ourselves, we should work in our societies, we should bring our both people to stand very in a courageous way to take painful decisions that will not be comfortable. Nonviolence is not a comfortable place. Compromise is not a comfortable place. But we have a shared destiny here. None of us is gonna disappear. And I think Jewish people or Palestinian or Christians are not gonna give up who they are. But I know that peace for us is to create this environment that everyone will practice who he is or who she is in a way of dignity, without without that this practice will be on the expense of each other. And to do that, we need a lot of support, a lot of work, a lot of healing. And for me, I know that this conflict has different values. There are national values, political values, ideological values. And I think every faith, every religion, every human being in this land has the right because has the right to live on it, because each nation and each people has deep roots to this land. And for me, I study the prophets, I study religion, different religions, and I always say Judaism, Islam, Christianity is talking a lot about nonviolence. I mean, you choose the ideology or you choose to pick up what you want if you aim for solution. Even Jesus himself, for me, he was a nonviolence activist. I mean, this issue of nonviolence is not that strange issue that we want to hang with because we want to stick to because we are desperate. Nonviolence doesn't come from despair, and nonviolence doesn't come from even hope. Nonviolence comes from belief, because I believe that I was born as a human being without being a victim or a victimizer to anyone. But I also have a mission as a Muslim, as a Palestinian, and as a human being to secure others' life. Without securing each other's life, every single side will do everything possible to secure his life. So we can call it whatever we call it, Israelis will call our action, whatever. It's endless game. No one look at us after 72 years. Look where we are today. No one can stand up and say I win. There is no winning. I mean, even in war, you can end conflicts in war, but you destroy your society. It will take you hundreds of years to heal what war has destroyed. I don't want to live in a place that built on people bodies. I don't want my freedom to pass or to step on Jewish graves. I want my freedom to pass through Jewish hearts. And this is the only way to my freedom. Because whomever the other side is, he is part of my life. He is part of my day. He is part of my dream, whether I like it or not. And I'm sure if we, Palestinian and Jewish people, will stand responsible to our identity and existence on this land can be a heaven to everyone, that everyone can practice who he is in a way that secure the next generation and maybe give an example to the globe that these conflicted two sides are creating a best example to humanity. And when I see Palestinian women, Palestinian youth, when I see Israeli kids sticking to their land and their identity without even hate, but anger, I have hope. I have hope because we have so much despair. This despair today that we are not engaged fully in killing each other gives me hope. And from that despair, we're going to create a different future. And we need to be partner with you, whomever you are. We need to be partner with this global human family around us, because we are not different than you. Believe me, my people are educated enough, my people are intelligent enough, and they are human enough to be part of this global family. And this is all our responsibility. If we believe in God, whomever we are, I think we should serve God by serving the people that God creates, and by respecting the land where God has decided for all religions to be born. That this is a holy mission for me. I'm not, I don't practice Islam 100%, but I know that Islam, Judaism, Christianity speaks to my heart, and I am a follower of all of these religions and faiths.
First off, I just want to say thank you so much, Ali, for your testimony tonight about a better way forward, not just in this conflict, but in the way that we as human beings deal with conflict around the world, what we need to do to maintain our own dignity in the midst of difficult times. And you offer great hope. I'm incredibly grateful to you for what you've delivered to us this evening. We'll hear from you again in a few minutes, but right now I want to ask my colleague Roberta Wall if she'd like to offer a few words.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Rodney. Thank you so much, Ali. I'm just so deeply moved to listen to your words and your vision. And for me, your cry that your people are as fully human as any other people, have the intelligence of any other people. I just, it really reminds me of the Torah, the Jewish Bible, when the people are groaning under Pharaoh and finally their cry is heard. And so I'm just taking into my heart that all of us hear this cry, and that God hears this cry, and that all of us as God hear this cry. And there's a level in which it's incredible that in the 21st century, a people has to still be crying out, see us as a people, as a human. It's unbearable and it's incredible. And I really want to say to the friends on this call from the United States that right now is such a crucial time for us to contact our incoming government, the current representatives, get involved and say, we care what US policy toward Israel and Palestine will be. When I spoke to I'm from North Carolina, and when I spoke to the different candidates running for office about Israel and Palestine, and what is the US role going to be? Are we going to be peacemakers who create a just and free and beautiful vision of the Holy Land, which, as Ali said, is what we pray for every week, every day? What I was told by our candidates for office is, oh, people don't care about that here. So if you are moved by what Ali shared and by this issue, I just want to say this is the time for us to let our representatives, and especially this new incoming government, know, yes, we actually do care, because so many of us really believe that if there can be a breakthrough between Israelis and Palestinians, that's like the tip of the candle. That is the flame that's going to really break open this struggle that the whole world is going through. And as Rodney said in his opening remarks, I've gone every year for more than 10 years. I met Ali in Bethlehem, I think it was 12 years ago. I was looking it up today. Every year, because I've been drawn again and again back to where Israelis and Palestinians meet, where Jews and Christians and Muslims meet in this land, because I have such a strong feeling also that if the breakthrough that the entire planet needs, you know, that if the breakthrough can happen there, it really will open up incredible shift in the whole world. And I'm especially feeling that tonight. It's the first night of Hanukkah. And this is a festival where we begin in the darkest time of year, and little by little, we bring in light. And what is the light that we want to bring in? This is the question for us to ask ourselves. What is the light, and what do we want the world to look like? And how can we put our traditions, our religious traditions, our other traditions in service of enlightening the world? That is really the work that many of us are involved in the Middle East. I actually wanted to begin by sharing a poem that one of the elders in my family wrote in January 1949. And I thought I would begin with that because I think sometimes it's confusing for many people in the United States to understand why American Jews have such a connection to Israel. And so it is confusing. Of course, if you speak to Palestinians in the United States, you will find the same thing, this fierce connection to Palestine. And this organization that we're all supporting, that Ali was the founder of, we want to really bring together American Jews and American Palestinians here to work together to support changing the energy. So anyway, one of the elders in my family, she lives in Jerusalem. She was a founder of a Jewish kibbutz on the border between Israel and Lebanon in 1949. She was born in New York. She became a socialist, it was called at that time a Zionist socialist. And this poem touches me so deeply because we always wonder, well, when these Jewish people from America and Europe were going there, didn't they see? What did they see? So this is a poem. Sasa, which is the name of the Palestinian town that was destroyed like a month before she arrived, right? Sasa, January 1949. We have climbed steep hills today and passed through stone horizons. And everywhere we walked, they were before us or behind us. Their village fits the contours of the hills, stone houses built back into the stone, like sightseers in a foreign city. We go through their rubble, picking up here a shoe, there a coffee cup, still whole amidst the ruins. Their figs were preserved to perfection, but their green and golden olives were bitter to our taste. And everywhere we walked, they were before us or behind us. The man whose father built these houses and brother carved these terraces and planted these fig trees to rest in the right spaces. slanting, leaning towards the sun. So if we were at a nonviolent communication training, and Ali has visited our nonviolent communication trainings in the West Bank, we begin every morning with a reading such as that, and then we say to the people, and we have usually a third Israelis, a third Palestinians, a third internationals, what comes up in you hearing this poem? We call it a remembrance. We begin our trainings in nonviolent communication with what we call a remembrance, something that helps us remember, why are we here? Something that helps us remember, how do we touch our hearts in the midst of a conflict where we're used to engaging politically, you know, my position, your position, I'm right, you're wrong. We shift that. We want to begin and ground our conversations in the heart. And this is completely off book. I hope that it's okay. Ali, I'd love to hear what comes up for you hearing the poem of that I just read from an elder in my own family. I'm putting Ali on the spot a little bit.
You know, I always believed, I mean, the last 20 years, when I was introduced to the Jewish humanity, I always believed that there is enough humanity and empathy within the Jewish people toward the Palestinian that the Palestinian nonviolence will work. I know, because in general, people say, my humanity is my weapon in nonviolence. Actually, Roberta, your heart is my weapon in this battle. It's not my heart. And I know that I have to be able to bring the Israeli society to see their heart and to see their humanity. It doesn't matter who's guilty and who's innocent. This is not the competition of suffering that we suffer from. Hearing this, this has brought me, I'm a refugee, has brought me to all the memories and the stories. And I think ages after ages during the life of this planet, everyone can assume that this planet is his or her, a whole planet. It doesn't matter what people believe in their belonging, but the only matter for me is their behavior. It doesn't matter who was here first, you know? We're killing each other over that argument. Who was here first? Land doesn't belong to anyone. We belong to it. This is what nonviolence taught me. And hearing this poet is just deepness my belief and just strengthen me that I am in the right side. And I have a good partner, Roberta.
Thank you, Ali. And that gives me a little relaxation to share just some stories from our nonviolent communication trainings in the West Bank that are so much reflected in what Ali's been sharing. And to point to some of the challenges I see. So one challenge that is so alive in the US, that is also alive from what I've seen in the Middle East, is that differing people are getting their information from completely different sources. So the way that this has affected our trainings, for example, so we've been having 9-day trainings with 60 to 100 people almost every year except 2 years, actually, for 11 years. Always in the West Bank, in the area of the West Bank where Israelis are allowed to travel freely, which is part of the area that our outgoing president in the US wanted to support annexing. And that stopped through a global nonviolent movement, right? This is significant. I just wanted to point that out to encourage us to get involved. So we were in the middle of our training about 4 years ago, and word came to the trainer team that there had been some act of violence the night before, and that many of the Palestinian participants were going to leave because they were afraid that revenge would be taken against them. This is in the middle of a nonviolent communication training. And something like this has happened almost every year. This is how unstable things are there. And just imagine the building up of trauma that everyone is living with there, right? The uncertainty that what's gonna happen tomorrow or in an hour that is gonna mean that I'm not safe. People are living on that edge, the Jews and the Palestinians. So this is also pointing to how much we need trauma healing within the Jewish people and within the Palestinian people. This is core to moving forward so people can live in peace. So what happened was we heard about this incredible act of violence. Then we heard of a revenge killing, so-called, and we brought everyone together. We asked people, please don't leave yet, because that was the first reaction, was total flight because of fear of fight. And we had an open and direct conversation in large groups and small groups between Israelis and Palestinians about what was going on. And just that we could speak about it, have what Rodney's calling a dangerous conversation, just the conversation. No one left. We completed our 9 days, and this is a community that's growing and growing and growing. So this is part of my role as a trainer in nonviolent communication, has been to just hold the space where the people in the region can have a conversation. And just seeing the magic that happens, no solutions, no political solutions. That's not what it was about. It was just people staying in the room to have a conversation. So for me, the question that I'm always asking is, what do we need to agree on to stop being enemies, right? And we're asking this, we must ask this in the United States right now, you know, and how much room can we give each other to have your own belief, your own way of life, your own values, you know, what is it that we do have to agree on to stop being enemies? And I think that Israelis and Palestinians are way ahead of us in the US, because I have seen hundreds of people in dialogue, constant continuing dialogue. And yes, it hasn't ended the occupation. It hasn't shifted the incredible violence that happens every day against the Palestinian people. So I don't want to minimize what really has to happen. And that in that context of violence, people there are having conversations way more than we are. From my experience here in North Carolina. So that was one incident that really transformed the situation at our training. Another, there's so many, but another one that I really wanted to speak about, because Ali mentioned, how do we stop comparing pain? So we actually, in our training, had a presentation from the bereaved family circle that Ali and his mother were part of founding. And Bassam, the current head, and I forgot which Israeli partner was there at the training.
Rami.
And it was Rami, you're right. Were you there? No, but you know that they were there.
But I know who's Bassam's best partner.
Okay, yeah, it was Rami and Bassam, thank you. And they spoke very much, from the heart about not comparing pain. And what we do at our trainings is we have some information or presentation, and then we have conversation held in the energy of nonviolent communication, which would mean really trying to speak from your heart without blame, as Ali was saying, without shame, just really speaking your truth as what you've heard affects you. So in the conversation after the presentation by the bereaved parents circle, one of our Israeli participants started crying. And he spoke about how his family had come from Europe. They fled the Holocaust. And when they arrived they were sent to Haifa and given a house to live in Haifa, which is a beautiful city in the north of Israel on the Mediterranean, not too far also from the Lebanese border, actually. And he started sobbing because he said, "My mother told us from day one, this is not our house. This house belongs to the Arabs," which is what Palestinians were mostly called back then. This is in the early 50s. "And when that family comes, we're going to give them their house back." And he's sobbing, telling this story because he said it traumatized him as a 6-year-old boy. He would sit on the porch and wait for somebody to come and kick him out of his house. And he was, just sobbing and talking about what it was like for him growing up in a house that he knew wasn't his house, and that his mother was determined to give back to these other people. And he talked about, this is so related to what you're saying, Ali, the healing that he needs of his heart, that his mother somehow was choosing these other people over him, that's the healing that has been haunting him. And as he was speaking, one of the Palestinian participants, and I both of these are men who I've known for many years who are really involved in the nonviolent communication movement. One is from Beit Safafa, which is a town in between Bethlehem, where Ali is right now, and Jerusalem, and the other from Haifa. Our Palestinian friend interrupted and said, "Surely you can't compare the pain of the boy who got to stay in the house with the pain of the boy who didn't get to stay in the house." So these are the moments we have in our trainings to stop, breathe, and everyone take in, what are you hearing? And then we make a decision, where do we take empathy first? Because now we have two people in great suffering. And how can we encounter both of their sufferings without ourselves comparing? Because depending on your identity, you're going to take a side, right? This is our conditioning. So how do we break through that? How do we get to that point where we're not comparing suffering? Even if it could be so challenging. Yeah, how could you compare the pain of the boy who got to live in the house with the boy who didn't get to live in the house, right? On one level, it's, how could you possibly have empathy for the Israeli child? And if we don't, we just fall into the cycle of violence. So these are some of the moments we have, 50 times a day in our trainings. And I just want to finish, I have so much I want to say, but just finish by saying that I have emphasized in most of my work in the Middle East, these trainings, bringing together Israelis and Palestinians. I've kind of looked at those trainings as like our flagship program was an expression I used one year, like somehow that is more important. And I'm so grateful to Ali and Taghyeer and others for helping me see that thinking from me is really centering the experience of the dominant culture. And also my thinking about this is very informed by the conversations Rodney and I also are having on Zoom about race. That what does it mean for me as a Jewish person in the context of the Middle East to decenter what is important to me, which I have to do to make room for the people who are not, who the systems don't exist to serve. So the way that's been happening for me is I've been shifting my work from valuing more, I would say, the encounter between Israelis and Palestinians to really learning and understanding more what can I do to support Palestinians deciding right now, being their own agents for change. And that's a shift I'm making. So I've joined American Friends of Taghyeer, and looking forward to continuing to just see how can I be in service of that. And I'll end with one vignette that maybe will explain what I'm talking about if it's a little confusing. When I was in Israel, I was there until March 11th. I left on one of the last flights out before COVID. In fact, I was in Bethlehem the day they shut it down for the first COVID shutdown. We just barely got out, which is an interesting experience. And look at my blogs, I actually wrote about it. But wow, I lost my train of thought. Well, I'm going to finish because my time is up and I actually lost my train of thought. I just want to say on this first night of Hanukkah, may we all be candles of bringing in light, and may we all just bring our hearts together for the better world. And may we learn from what Israelis and Palestinians are doing with great humility. We need so much humility in this country. Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you so much, Roberta. Incredibly grateful for your stories. And I just have to say, I won't take too long with this, but your story, your ancestor story about January 1949 and going to, was it Sasha, the city?
Sasa.
Sasa. I remember when I was an archaeologist excavating at Ansapuri near the old city of Sepphoris, staying in a place called Mitzpe Hoshaya, which was a settlement, a Jewish, not settlement, a Jewish community in the region. And one day I was walking through the forest, beautiful pine forest in the woods, climbed a mountain, walked through the forest. And as I was walking, I began to trip over stones. And I began to look, and I said the stones were kind of strange in this forest because the stones looked like they were squared off. And I wondered if I'd stumbled into some sort of ancient settlement, you know, hey, we haven't excavated here, maybe we should excavate here. And then I realized that these were modern homes. And I remember years later, after hearing what had happened and how the people had been moved from Sepphoris forcibly in one night and moved into what is now Nazareth. They were moved into Nazareth. And I remember one day I was preaching at a church here in North Carolina, and I told that story. And as I walked out of the pulpit and walked down and spoke to one of the people, a gentleman walked up to me and he says, this story that you told was incomplete. It was wrong. I said, what do you mean? He said, you talked about the story of the Israelis forcing the Palestinians from their home and destroying their city. I said, yeah. He said, well, that's not the full story. I said, what do you mean? He said, it wasn't only Israelis armies that was there that day. The American army was there as well. It broke my heart, stunned me to know that we as Americans participated in the dislocation of the Palestinian people at that point in time. So thank you for your story. Thank you for all that you said. And I want to start off with a question for Ali. And Ali, you've talked about nonviolence and the significance of nonviolence. I wanted to wrestle with this notion. You are a freedom fighter. You are one who spent time behind bars. What do your colleagues think about your turn to nonviolence? Do they think of it as betrayal? Do many of them get on board with you? Have you been able to convince others that this is a better way forward? Love to hear what you say about that.
Yeah, this is not an easy way to go. Most of my friends who were in prison with me, we have this kind of trust between us, you know? And even in prison, we join nonviolent struggle, hunger strike, and violence outside the prison. But I also, my family and myself has paid high prices to say what I'm saying, which gives me a credit in a way with them.
Yes.
But, and on the other hand, I don't speak about nonviolence just from my heart. I speak about nonviolence as a strategic way for freedom, as a struggle, as a fight. But in this fight, you don't murder anyone. In this fight, you win over hate, and you keep your morality. Because you can win over things, but you lose your morality. I don't want to win this way. On the other hand, Palestinians today are absolutely convinced that violence doesn't work. And I'm not talking here about the right of resistance, but because when I talk to my colleagues and my activists, my team, my partners, I always say, do you want to be right or do you want to succeed? Because being right, everyone is right. That's the problem. It's another problem. That every one for what he demand on this land is right. So where is the truth? The truth cannot be one-sided. So if you want to be truthful and successful, you have to see the whole pictures, both sides. So you talk to them and you engage them also daily in actions. So people didn't get like, tired or something. On the other hand, definitely there is a criticism. Definitely there are some attacks. There is a lot of blame on me personally because I am the crazy one who speaks to settlers, and sometimes people call me the traitor sometimes. But I know very well that every single solution maker who take a step, courageous step, has caused him prices. But by the end, he won. Because, whether prophets, activists, they always started with hard, challenges on the ground. And sometimes to deal with the madness, you have to be crazy enough. And crazy enough is to be nonviolent in this. On the other hand, I always say, give me another successful example of violence and consider me your soldier. Until now, no one could give me a successful example. Sometimes, you have to argue through people's mind, not through your belief, because they are not in your place. And I know that Palestinian people also are not fanatics, you know. I mean, ISIS, just imagine, even though Palestine and Israel, I mean, the Holy Land, West Bank, whatever you call it, was supposed to be the best environment for ISIS to fit in. There's a lot of anger, injustice, pain, whatever. This is the only place that ISIS couldn't fit in. We forbid ISIS to take any, attacks or against Israel. It's by our statement, it's by our faith, so we are angry, but we are not fanatics. And when people get it to their mind, believe me, today Taghyeer, the first event that Taghyeer has launched after 6 months of finding Taghyeer 4 years ago is to celebrate the International Peace Day. And our strategy was to do as much as workshop that we could. We did 39 workshops in 45 days. Just imagine that, because we were rushing. We want to show this movement, and people say, let's give the women, some kind of training about women rights. We didn't engage women by educating them about their right. Women knows what their right is. And we didn't say, let's empower women. I promise you, Israeli Palestinian women are super powerful. But then women has to be respected. So most of these workshops, we educate men about women's rights. And after these workshops in 49 days, 3,500 Palestinians show up in that event. I cried that day. So if my people can do that, everything is possible. So yeah, and this can cost me my life, but whatever the price will be, from my life, even my dignity, for this dream to happen, I'm ready to pay it, because I know and I experienced the price of war. Whatever the price will be, it's much cheaper than the price of war.
Amen. Thank you so much for an honest response to a very difficult question, to be sure. And I just really applaud the fact that you lift up this notion that your life, though the nonviolent movement is an affirmation of your life is something you're willing to give for the success of this larger movement.
Definitely.
Amen.
People give their life in everywhere for this. I mean, we have a great examples of sacrifice. So I would have sacrificed for a moral approach than a terrorist approach. I don't want to die as a terrorist.
Amen. Thank you for that. Roberta, I want to wrestle with you with a similar kind of question. Taking the choice that you have taken to stand with people who are the quote unquote enemy of the Jewish people, of the people of Israel. I've heard this rhetoric over and over again. I'm sure that you must have taken a good deal of abuse too, perhaps even called, an anti-Semite at times for engaging in such conversation. Tell me a little bit about the resistance that you've faced from your own people for deciding to do this nonviolent communication work.
Yeah, I would say that when I first started speaking out in support of the Palestinian people in a organized Jewish community, there were definitely a lot of trust issues coming up. And I've seen a huge shift. I mean, now I've been giving trainings and talk. Well, we brought Ali to my synagogue in Asheville a few years ago, and we've brought combatants for peace there, and I've given lots of talks, and it's not that everyone agrees, but people stay in the room and listen. So that's been a really huge shift. And I think I think there are many things driving the shift. One is that so many of the young Jewish people in America don't want to get involved in organized Jewish community because they oppose the occupation of Palestine and oppose the treatment of Palestinians. And so that is, of course, extremely troubling to the Jewish community. So I think of that as like people walking with their feet. So I think that's helping shift things. And J Street, which is really openly against the occupation. And I was at their, just before COVID, at their big gathering, and they're just growing and growing in influence. So I think there's a real shift. And I think it's super important that American Jews and American Christians who are against the occupation and want Israel and Palestine to really find a solution that works for everyone, that we have got to speak up and be seen, because there's this illusion that the Jews here don't feel that way, and it's not true. And there's an illusion that most of the Christians are right wingers, and it's not true. So we have to find our voices. So.
Thank you for that. And you just raised a point that I want to follow up with Ali on. So in America, one of the major obstacles that I think the Palestinian people have to face is the notion of Christian Zionism. This view that is often much more fanatical than Zionism, even, because it's the larger Christian community that believes it's got a stake in maintaining the state of Israel in a fairly unchallengeable, uncritiquable manner. What might your understanding of nonviolence, how would you speak to Christian Zionists, and what might you say to begin to sway their opinions?
I think one of the biggest problem that keeps this conflict going are people taking sides. People like to be pro these or pro those. What we call everyone to be is to be pro solution. Because if you care about Israel, I think you have to support a moral Israel. A moral Israel should not be an occupying country until today in this, in this history. On the other hand, practicing Christianity should not be by opinion or by behavior or by belief on the expense of any other nation or faith. I think when radical Islam take advantage in our case by blowing up people and raising hate, I think this is our mission to stand up as Muslims and say this is not in our name and should not be in our names. On the other hand, I understand the values of that support, what is behind that support. But I definitely disagree about, sometimes, excuse my word, the blindness of following someone. Because if I am a good friend of someone, I should be truthful to him or to her. And Israel needs support by opening Israel eyes, not bringing down Israel. On the other hand, when I say Christianity, my best friends and activists here, Palestinian Christian, Sami Awad, that Roberta knows. He's a Christian. He's a very close friend to mine. His even uncle, Mubarak Awad, has been deported outside Palestine in 1985 because he was the first Palestinian to march peacefully in Jerusalem and raise nonviolence. I think there is no God will be happy by the killing of the others. On the other hand, we don't deserve to die. Israel can use every single excuse that you can imagine, secure ourselves, but we know the truth. Israel knows the truth. We can also use every single excuse to legitimize our violence, but this is endless. I need the Christian people and Jewish people first, even before Muslims, to stand by me because I stand by them. It's a mutual mission. And finally, if you consider this land as a holy land, try to save our blood, not to waste it by supporting one side. Believe me, the Palestinian people even are different than all the Arab people, all the Muslim people. The first constitution that we choose for the first time in our life in 1995, I think, or 96, is a secular one. We are not this, religious or national society. We are such an open society who is welcoming every human being. So please don't be part of the divide. If you are not part of the problem, try to be part of the solution. If you are not, and if you cannot be part of the solution, don't be part of the problem, please. We don't need more engagement in this conflict by taking sides.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Roberta, I guess I'll ask a similar question of you. As you think about notions like Christian Zionism, what do you say to the Christian Zionists and their unfettered, uncritical support of Israel at all costs? How might you speak to this larger constituency?
I would love to. I don't know if I have so much. What comes up for me is first when I become aware of this Christian support for Israel annexing Palestinian land and bringing all the Jews back there to take over. I feel really scared. I feel quite terrified because that's has nothing to do with my vision of Judaism and I come from a family. All four of my grandparents were quite involved in supporting the foundation of Israel. I have family and all four of my lineages. This is never what it was about. It was just about creating a safe haven for the Jewish people. And it's not about making Jewish people sacrifices for a Christian vision. It's actually very scary for me. Yeah, and what it brings up for me on a very deep level is what do I do with my identity as a Jewish person if that's what it means in the world? And that's something that's so alive in this struggle, because I've heard so many Palestinians ask the same thing. It's like, should we just go beyond identity? But no, there's a part of us that doesn't want to do that because our identities are so beautiful. So my vision really is a partnership. I mean, when I see, the accomplishments of the Jewish people and the Israeli people are incredible. And then I see the Palestinian people who, despite all odds, this week I had 2 conversations with friends in the West Bank, and I asked them what's happening with COVID and what's your, one is a Palestinian living here, and he's in touch with the West Bank, daily. And he talked about how it's shocking for him how in the US, people are dying alone. He said, that's not happening in the West Bank. No one is left alone. So there is this beautiful beautiful teachings of the Palestinian way of life that the rest of us need. So my vision is that we bring this all together, and that this is going to be the elevation of humanity, not the suppressing of one over the other. You're muted, Rodney.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The question I want to ask of both of you is the first question that comes from Deborah Stores. She asks, what do you think the biggest misconception is that people have on each side of the other? What's the biggest misperception?
I think we live together, but we don't see each other. And, you know, putting a face to the other is scary, because people are afraid of the price of peace. What is missing here is recognition. And when I say recognition, is not to recognize the identity, and it's not to recognize or compromise. It's much deeper than that. It's to recognize the legitimate historical, ideological, national, political, human, deep roots to this land for both sides. Means that in every single vision that we design in our mind, we have to consider the other, that he has the same right as we are. It's not giving him or doing him a favor. And on the other hand, there is a lack of trust. And this came after so many years of failures of peace process. I don't blame the people. And this is our role as activists, to bring some kind of trust back, that people first will trust themselves and then can trust each other. I think these two things are so important to me.
And I just add that I'm remembering a time I was in Bethlehem. We had a training, and I came with a very religious Jewish friend of mine. And the first invitation in the circle was to share something that you're afraid to say, because it was a very mixed crowd, Jews and Palestinians. And my friend whispered to me that they all want to kill me. And I said, say that. And he's like, no way. So what I've seen is there is this misconception that people want to kill each other.
Fear.
Yeah, you know, and just you cannot even grasp. It's very hard to grasp unless you go there, how completely separated intentionally people are, except in the Israeli hospitals. And I have sat in very religious communities where we are talking about exactly what we're talking about now, you know, like very Jewish religious communities. And at some point, inevitably, someone who works in a hospital will say, well, actually, I really love the Palestinians. We're always together in the hospital. And I think that relates to, you know, some of when we think about what do we do to change things. You know, I don't have an answer for this, and it's not my role to have an answer, but to just ask the question, what is the role of people working together on common projects? Because we could see that historically in the US, you know, when there was a strong trade union movement and people of color and white workers were together, that's when things were advancing, you know. It's a kind of, what's the role of that? I don't have an answer. And that's something I'd actually love to hear if Ali wants to speak to that, if you're okay with that, Rodney. Because I heard you say before, Ali, how putting nonviolence in service of creating a better life is so crucial. So how does that come down in terms of joint employment projects, joint solar projects, stuff like that. I don't know if you want to go there or not, Rodney.
Fine, love to hear.
Okay.
Yeah, Palestinians are expecting from any peace approach or nonviolence is to change their life conditions, because in a way that they also lost their trust in any peace agreement or any peace approach. Let me be open and tell you more. Me personally has experienced that even peace activists and peace groups travel to five-star hotels and we do summer camps together, we eat hummus and we hug each other, and by the end of the day we go back to our refugee camps and Israelis go to the nice beach. So we're not equal in life conditions. On the other hand, a clever movement, let me give you an example of Hamas. I don't think that Palestinian has voted for Hamas in 2006 because they believe that Hamas is the best for them. I think Hamas did two things. They did social services, community services, and they used religion as a very sensitive, emotional things with the corruption of the other political parties, with the PA, with Fatah or whatever. So they used that. It was a game for them.
Mm-hmm.
But as an accomplishment, they damaged Gaza. There is no winning. So Hamas provides services. And this is the movement that we also want to create. We want to serve the community. We want to develop the community. I don't want to go and convince Palestinians how peace is beautiful. Believe me, we know that peace is beautiful, but we need to live it. We need to taste it. And I know that until now, there is no peaceful agreement for us to taste that, or there is no also joint initiative that has succeeded effectively to change our life conditions. So that's why we Palestinians has to take it in our hand and put nonviolence as an identity for living that will guarantee changing conditions by engaging everyone on the ground. This is a massive national movement that I mean. And this needs a lot of investment, a lot of effort, a lot of experience, and a lot of training.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And may that all come to pass. May it happen. Next question comes from one of my colleagues, an African-American minister who's very much interested in the Palestinian issues, Palestinian rights issues, Reverend Paul McAllister. He asks about the most recent peace accords between Israel and a number of different Arab nations. He's wondering, do you think that this might provide a good chance of peace? Are you optimistic about it? And should we as Americans who are pro-Palestinian be in favor of these accords?
You know, with my sorrows for years, sometimes people go around the problem and they don't go to the problem. I think solving the problem with the Arabs around the Palestinian issue will not help. Because listen, Dubai is peaceful. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure it's reconciliation. I mean, Israel has signed peace agreement with Jordan and Egypt. I'm not sure there is reconciliation there. Actually, the most radical movement are in Egypt. And Sinai was a place for, for fanatics to get through and try to whatever. Mm-hmm. I think the heart of the problem is the Palestinian issue. Without solving that, or without engaging the Palestinian in that role, this is not going to help. On the other hand, maybe politically this will put a pressure on the Palestinian people to be on the table. But mm-hmm. Palestinians are afraid of the price of it. Because there are two ways you come to negotiation: with broken eyes and heart, or with dignity. So any Palestinian leader will not be able to sign on a hard and take hard decision if he's going to lose the Palestinian society. So what engaged the Palestinian society can be a gate. I mean, can be by offering the Palestinian normal life. Finally, I will say, Israel, I mean, Palestinians speak about themselves. And the core of the Israeli problem is with the Palestinian. So if there is, Israel can normalize its relation with all the world, But does that mean peace for Israel? Does that mean a real normalization for Israel? I'm not sure. So I think we Palestinians can represent ourselves. We are strong enough to be partners in any peace approach. And with my sorrow, some Arabs, for their own interest, jump to the wave. I would advise Saudi Arabia or any other country just to try to deal with your radicalism, with your corruption, with lack of women. Women just start driving in Saudi Arabia. There is a tremendous dictatorship in these countries. So before you jump and consider yourself as a hero for peace, just try to deal with your own problem. And maybe if you need to pressure or force someone, maybe the force should be on both sides to sit on the table. Don't encourage one on the expense of the other.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I also blame the Palestinian leadership, because this is also the consequences of our failure in our leadership, the consequences of corruption, the consequences of engaging the Palestinian with the leadership. We also have a big guilt on that.
Amen. Thank you for that. And I don't know if you wanted to weigh in a bit on that question at all, Roberta. What do you think about this most recent peace accord?
I really defer to Ali. It's hard for me to not support any countries making peace. And I think, as Ali is sharing, it's hard to trust. Why are they doing this? It's kind of ignoring the elephant in the room. So it's very hard to trust. Yeah.
Okay. As you talk about elephants, this next question from Barbara Bash really does wrestle with elephants here. She asks, and I'm going to ask this of you first, Roberta, and ask you to answer this in terms of the context of the United States, and then ask Ali to talk about it in terms of his own region. What ground has been lost during the Trump years, and how do we begin to see that that ground is restored? How do we begin to work to get beyond what we've lost in the last few years?
I think, yeah, tremendous ground has been lost. For one thing, up until the Trump administration came in, USAID was funding many of the peace work, giving support to different organizations and institutions that were supporting building Palestinian civil society. All that was cut out. I think just the whole atmosphere of the settlements just expanding and expanding. And I'm not super hopeful right now about the incoming Democratic administration. I think we have got to speak up. I do not have a lot of confidence that they understand that most Jewish people, I think, I could be wrong, I think most Jewish people and I think most of the American people want the Palestinians to have a sovereignty over their land and their lives. Mm-hmm. So let's really speak up. I know here where I live in Asheville, North Carolina, the Republicans won for the House seat and the Senate, and it's time that we sit down and talk to them. We've got to talk to them, you know.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Ali, what do you think ground has been lost in the Trump years, and how do we begin to regain that ground?
I think hope. You know, hope has been lost because of the US policy toward the Middle East. A lot of despair that has created that it will take us as activists years to heal,
Mhm.
and political decisions that need to be fixed. I mean, because hope is not enough. You need a practical political, environment and approach for people to believe in. And I think that the United States also, let me speak a little bit about the US itself, has invested a lot outside more than inside. And recently, the American society is facing a tremendous problems suddenly because of the investment outside on the expense of the society itself. Finally, I would say that I don't believe in politicians because I think politicians are serving political initiatives and political plans that has not been designed just by one person. And on the other hand, it's a system. We need to change the system, and people just can't change the system. And I always say, because people say, well, maybe it's the grassroots, but it's the political leadership that has to decide. I'm telling you, we have so many politicians, but we don't have leaders. Because politicians are managers of the present, of reality. Leaders are managers of a good vision for the future. So politicians can do harm as this man did. But now it's going to take leaders years to fix and design a normal vision. Because you can be a hero if you speak to people emotion, especially if they are in fear. But by the years, they will discover that you was against them totally. I mean, removing the embassy to Jerusalem, the US embassy, it was a game playing in the Jewish blood. Because can you imagine what could be the price that Israelis will pay for that? So these are horrible steps. And finally, personally, I paid the price. I was forbidden to come to the States for more than 3 years. And for me, that was a big challenge because United States and the people of the United States, for me, as a real and core players in this solution, in this problem. And the US and the US people has been supportive all of these years, as Roberta said, for not for the peace building. The Palestinian employees were taking their salaries because from the US money.
Mhm.
So the whole financial system will take us years now to fix. So there is a tremendous damage that has happened, and I believe in our partnership, and I hope that we will gonna fix it together.
Mhm. Amen. Thank you.
And I just want to add something.
Yeah.
I think something else that has been a real casualty is that so many of us have been so focused on what's happening in this country, and necessarily so, that we really haven't paid attention to what's the US doing in the world. And we've just even lost the capacity to even vision the US playing a different role in the world. I think that is a big casualty also, that I'm not so hopeful about the vision of the wing of the Democratic Party that's coming in. And my personal support for all the Democratic candidates, I followed Angela Davis, who said, I'd rather fight for our vision under the Democrats than under the Republicans. So let's wake up now and not fall asleep. Yeah.
I think that's a great reminder from Barack Obama that election is not the end of it. Once we get elected, then you have to force me to do what it is you want to see done. And that's a reminder to us all right now. If we want to see a different policy, we've got to work to really make that policy come into effect. A question that comes from one of our former students, Reverend Joey Haynes, has to do with the notion of hope. Are young Palestinian people hopeful? And if they are hopeful, what is the source of their hope? I'll start with Ali, and then Roberto, you please jump in.
No, I think this generation, listen, they are less hateful, but they are more angry. And lack of opportunities to study, to travel, for jobs. We're talking here about 56% of unemployed. People leave their universities and go to work in settlements, young people. Where this hope can come from. That's why our mission is so important, to keep the hope, especially for young people. On the other hand, what is hopeful, that they are more social than political. They stop believing in their political parties or these corrupted political leaders. So they become engaged more socially than politically in fight or in violence. Number three, I think one of the biggest issues here, that they are the victims of political relations between political leadership here and the world. So if the political leadership here has a wrong role with some country, the victims are the young people, because they get forbid to travel or to study or to get support. So I'm hopeful about them, but they are not hopeful. They have no hope of anything, honestly.
Thank you. Roberta, what do you think? I know that you probably will defer, but would love to hear.
Yeah, actually, I want to ask Ali a question about what I've been thinking about, which is, Ali, what would you say is the role of social media among the young people, among young Palestinians?
It's both ways, because social media can raise their anger more and more, but it cannot bring them to the ground to take actions or violence action. On the other hand, social media is making them busy more than anything else, because there is so much emptiness within young people. That's why our focus in young people and women as a movement. Because these young people, when they got a chance to be engaged in social media, socially, in action, in nonviolence, they feel important. You know, many Palestinian young people who were engaged in the stabbing of Jewish people, young Palestinian, they get knives and go to the street. They were looking to suicide, to die more than to kill. Because you're attacking an armed soldier and you're coming with your knife, and they were ready to die. People have lost their hope. So for me, I see so much emptiness in social media also. Most of their conversation with my sorrow is not truthful, is not about culture, it's not about science, it's about silly things. It seems like they have lost the trust of anything, and they don't want to work on themselves. And this is very, very dangerous, because this generation, if it will keep raise itself like this, I'm not sure where they will end.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And that's, I think, I worry that there's a little bit of middle-aged whatever that sets in there too. I think we all think of the next generation and we're like, what the heck are they doing? What are they doing? Where's the future's in your hands? Wanted to wrestle with this question, and the question was asked about the two-state solution. The two-state solution is an opportunity to provide a dignity that might provide dignity to both peoples. And asked about whether or not you hope in this. This was asked by one of our students, Roger Rizek, who actually is Arab in his own background. I'll put that out there in this way. I'll say, do you believe in the two-state solution? Or is there a better alternative that you see? And I might suspect there might be something different listening to your questions, your answers to some other questions. But we'll start with you, Ali, and then we'll ask Roberta the same thing.
I believe in two-state solution as a general principle, but as the reality today, I'm not sure about. I think we do need a two-state solution, but we don't need a two divided states because it's not going to work. It's not going to work, and that's why Oslo failed. You know, Oslo has ignored the refugees and the settlers, right? Like an example. I'm a refugee, and there is a there are good models today, like two-state, one homeland, or land for all. You can Google that, because Jewish people feel a deep root to the West Bank. Palestinians feel deep roots to Israel, where it's Israel or Jaffa. So shall we switch? We cannot switch. I mean, it's impossible. On the other hand, is it about one state? No, it's not going to be one state. First, Jewish people want to be a majority in a place where they feel secure, controlling themselves by themselves. On the other hand, if you create one state, who's going to rule that state? Who's going to be minority and majority? Are we creating apartheid here? So I deeply believe in two-state in a federal model. So these two states, I always say, we are like couple. We are not married and we are not divorced. We cannot get divorced totally, and we cannot be married in one home. So we have to create a new design of partnership, where each one will save his own independent national identity with dignity, but we need each other because we cannot live without each other. We need to develop this land and to design an effective model for peace. We need like, it's not about signing an agreement, because we can sign a peace agreement, but it's become a piece of paper if it doesn't guarantee enough dignified conditions. And to allow dignified conditions, we need both sides to be engaged fully in a normal relation that provide that. This is what I believe in, and maybe this will lead us to one state. But at least if we don't have one state, then at least we are not going to kill each other.
I think your colleague Hanan Schlesinger described something similar when he called it a three-state solution. A state for each group and then a homeland for everyone, something like that.
In a way.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. What do you think, Roberta?
I really love how Ali is thinking about it and sharing about it. And for me, the solution is something that needs to emerge from a new consciousness, a consciousness that is much less dual, right? So as long as the model of negotiation continues to be this side versus this side, and who's going to compromise, and there's no integration of the different needs of everyone, I don't have any faith in any solution. And I really have such respect for Ali, because I really trust that you see that the solution is about meeting the needs of all the inhabitants of the land. And so I think out of that consciousness, we will get a political solution. And that's kind of one of the bases of nonviolent communication, you know. And it's from that quote that's attributed to Einstein, you know, that a problem that is created in one consciousness, which is our needs and your needs, and they're different and they're in conflict, right? That the solution cannot come out of that same consciousness. So, yeah.
Thank you. I love that. And that question, I mean, the solution that you just gave there about a new consciousness. What is the role of narrative in the resolution of this conflict? How might you change the narrative, and how might that bring about a different sense of relationship, of peace, of hope going forward?
I think we are two nations who came out of history and still in their own conflict, but we are both tired. We are so tired of this narrative. You know, I always tell young people, listen, you are not responsible about the past, you are responsible about the future. So don't be guilty and stuck in the past. On the other hand, we cannot create one narrative. I mean, peace is not to live with the common. Peace is to be able to manage the differences. If we are manage the because we are different, we're not the same. I think the narrative also has to be spoken in a different way. The history has to be spoken in a different way. You know, we try, Palestinian, try to say that the Holocaust has happened, but it was not 6 million people. Look where stuck we are. Israeli are not allowed to say the word Nakba in their schools, which is the Palestinian catastrophe in 1948. If we study history as it is, in a fashion that not to blame anyone or to put guilt on anyone or to be afraid of saying the truth. You know what? Jewish people were here 3,000 years ago. I'm not afraid to say that. This is what God said, not me. But when it comes to politicians, they will ignore any single Jewish roots, I promise you. You know, when religious people become politicians, God, I think, will be upset, or vice versa. When politicians become religious, using religion for their political initiatives, again, God is upset, but people more upset. So anyways, I think we have to find a new way. How do we look to ourselves and how do we see our narrative and how do we take the other side narrative without being afraid of the price of it?
Yes. Thank you for that. Roberta?
Yeah, just what Ali's sharing about how do we look at each other's narrative. For me, that's what I want to be working on for myself. How do I look at other people's narratives and how can I make space for other people's narratives? It gets back to that question of what do we need to agree on to stop being enemies? And this comes up all the time in our nonviolent communication trainings where people, to meet their need for safety or trust, they want the other person to completely agree with their narrative. And that's just unrealistic and it's not necessary. So I think what we want to really start to do more and more is understand what need is being met for the Palestinian people and having the narrative they have. What need is being met for the Jewish people and having the narrative that they have, and really just allow the full flourishing of those needs. It's needs for safety and dignity and creativity and beauty and to really take each other's narratives into our hearts. It's not about believing them or not believing them. And we can see the beauty in each other's narratives without agreeing or disagreeing. And again, this is one of the core practices of nonviolent communication, that we can encounter each other's beliefs and really see them as beautiful and see that they're really supporting. It's been crucial for the Palestinian people to see 48 as a Nakba. You know, I could see it as a Nakba for the Palestinian people. That doesn't mean that I have to agree that it was a Nakba for the Jewish people. But, you know, how we can just really make room for each other's experience. And out of doing that that's the new configuration of a state. You know, this is what we're still struggling with in our country so deeply. You know, how do we make room for the full flourishing of everyone's experience? When we make room for it, we don't need violence, right? We only need violence when someone is trying to prevent someone else from having a full experience of life as they see it. So
interesting. I might push back and suggest that that narratives often are the source of the conflict, though. So having your full narrative might be that which causes the conflict with the other.
I don't No, like, let's say, let's look at as a Jewish person, a Jewish narrative that, one that my ancestors subscribed to, that the only way Jewish people will be safe is when Palestinians accept their hegemony. And this is a letter from Jabotinsky, one of the Zionists. So one of my great grand uncle brought Jabotinsky to Israel. So I've been like, I'm trying to unpack this harsh Zionist view. So if that's your narrative, and I wanted to encounter that from the energy of nonviolent communication, okay, or the energy of nonviolence, I would just listen. So what's at the heart of that is, how can Jewish people really be safe here? That's what's at the heart of that. I don't have to dismiss, deny, or push away the strategy is to have hegemony over the Palestinian people. What I can do is say, let's talk about ways that the Jewish people can be safe in Israel. Are there any ways we can find that will promote that safety, or guarantee that safety, or move us closer to that safety, that don't suppress the Palestinian people? Because in fact, after 70 years, we have seen that strategy actually doesn't work. So I think we can really figure out, look at any narrative and just look for the human need at the core of it. You know, it's usually safety. And I've seen also at our NBC trainings over and over, and I'm sure Ali has seen this in the parent circle and Roots, you know, when he was working more directly with Israelis, that there's this moment when everyone realizes, wow, we all have the same needs. We all want the same thing. Yeah. The conflict isn't there. The conflict is the strategies we use to meet them. So let's find new strategies to meet the same needs.
Exactly. Thank you. And that's one of the things that we worked on in our nonviolent communication work, even with us. Our first notion of visioning, we realized, hold on, Biden and Bernie supporters have the same basic vision, just different tactics to getting there. Grateful for this. I'm going to ask one last question. This is from Reverend Elizabeth Sigmund. She is a woman who has been, I think, at least twice with me on the Mideast Travel Seminar, and she's gone a third time herself without me. She asked a question that was born of her experience in the region. Literally, what should we be doing as those who are interested? What should we be pushing our representatives to do at the governmental level? How should we be lobbying them or pressing them for change in this regard? What do you think, Ali?
In my opinion, the first thing is not to wait for them, not to wait for your representative to do something here. Mm-hmm. We need you, we need your support. And when I say support, I'm not saying just your money. We need something more important that includes your money, which is yourself. Because we need resources, we need people with experience, we need a lot. We're building a society here. Mm-hmm. Number two, yes, I think also to have an opinion in this conflict about solution is such a difficult thing. You know, here, like in Israel and Palestine, you say 2 Israelis, 3 opinion. It's a say within Israel. Also here in Palestine. I think the US people and not the political leadership has to stand much more strongly toward a solution here than any other people, because I think the last election was a massive non-violence movement. The whole nation has stand up and decide something else. And as you are able to do that, don't forget part of the price that we pay is about the last election before this one. Our blood was part of that.
Yes.
And we need you now to do much more. Number three, talk to our politician, not just to your own politician, because our politicians sometimes will listen from you in the US more than from their own people. Because there is this competition that everyone want to have the US support. And the US support has to be, in my opinion, with the full engagement of the society of the US people. Finally, and going back to the last question, I will say, we are not trying to change people's identity. No one is going to give up who he is or who she is. Solution is to change behaviors. Occupation is a behavior. Violence is a behavior. So that's why you cannot change anything else if you force Jewish people or Palestinian to give up their own identity. Christian, Muslims, Jewish, we will stay who we are. But definitely we have to change what we are about. And for us to do that, we are part of you. I mean, you have a very successful models in life, in science, in everything. We need you because as much as you invest here, as much, I think it's a moral mission. It's a holy mission to be part of the solution here.
Amen. Well, thank you. And I'm going to let that be the last word for tonight. Thank you so much for your time, your thoughts in this conversation. I hope it was enlightening for everybody who's been here. I've been blessed by each of the words that have spilled out of both of your mouths. I think that there is so much potential for change in this notion of nonviolence. I think it refocuses our attention, what we need to focus on as we work in this larger world. We focus on this issue of nonviolence. So I appreciate not only the witness that you both have provided for us, but the direction that you send us in as we move towards nonviolence. And I think that there's hope and solutions, not just for what goes on in quote unquote Palestine and Israel, but what goes on in conflicts around the world. Even right here as we wrestle with the issue of race in America, listening to the work that you're doing in nonviolence is a great inspiration. So I'm very grateful for all that you all have shared this evening. Before we close out tonight, though, I want to ask Stephen Stern if he'd like to tell people about how we can be involved in Taghyeer here in America. If you can give us some guidance on how we can be a part of this larger movement, we'd appreciate it.
Can we open the chat and post the link to American Friends of Taghyeer in the chat? So
no,
people.
I just put it in the Q&A. Aaron, if you could confirm that it went up. It's not completely clear to me. Hi, I'm Stephen Stern. I'm proud to have been associated with the Taghyeer movement from the beginning. It's doing incredible work on the ground. We talked a little bit about it tonight. Yes, and it's in the Q&A. You can contact me for further follow-up. We're doing everything we can to support this great movement. We just put out a newsletter of our recent activities, the recent activities on the ground by the Palestinian team. So I would be happy to share that newsletter with anyone who wants it. I can send it to Rodney and the team at the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation. And I thank you. And thank you, Ali. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for that guidance. And hopefully there'll be some people out here tonight that will become new friends of Taghyeer. Excited about that, excited about being able to begin this conversation. This is not the end of a conversation. This is the beginning of a conversation that will continue and will continue to grow and unfold. So I'm incredibly excited about this. I'm incredibly excited about this partnership that we see developing even in this conversation. Well, I hope you all have appreciated this dialogue this evening. I hope that you all will give a hand of thanks to Ali and Roberta. We may not be able to hear you, but know that I'm doing it symbolically with you. And please join us next month. We're going to focus our dangerous dialogue on human sexual trafficking and what we can begin to do as faith community to work against this, this crisis that continues to plague not just America, but right here in Charlotte, North Carolina as well. A shame of Charlotte, I would say, to be sure. Thank you all for participating and look forward to seeing you next time. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.